I caught my first fish when I was 5. When it bit, electricity ran up my arm. This electricity had me hooked, so did all the mysteries underwater. I had to figure out what was down there, and I did, one fish at a time. I grew up in East Tennessee, and the streams I fished were covered in vegetation and full of animals. I did not understand the world of people, but when I was on the water, everything made sense. There, I was an animal in my element. I was at home. I started fly fishing in my teens. The feel of the fly rod flexing and the sight of that neon line unfurling through the air, back and forth, I found it so beautiful. When I fished, I felt like an artist. Everywhere I went, I cast a fly rod. Even when I was stuck in school or church and didn't actually have a rod in my hand, I was still casting. I superimposed my imagination over everything, and I cast between all the people and objects as if they were boulders and trees. Then, when I got back to the stream, I had all sorts of new tricks to try. At 19, I started guiding in Colorado. From there, I lived on rivers all over, from Montana to Patagonia. In 2006, I went to the Amazon for the first time. A medicine man and his family took me in. I carved out my own canoe and then I stuck around. I learned the language. I paddled, fished, and studied plant medicine. I think I was a novelty to most of the villagers, but for the first time, I felt accepted in a human community. I eventually went back out to guide and play throughout the Americas, but over the next decade, I spent a couple months a year there. By 2016, rivers were my life, but guiding and adventuring were no longer enough. I threw myself into protecting and healing the Amazon and its tributaries. I fell on my face in my first 2 projects. Running around cities trying to drum up support drained me. I gave up on them. Later in the year, though, things did come together. I helped the Kayapo tribe start a fly fishing operation on their stretch of the Xingu River. I traveled up and down the river and stayed in different villages. I presented fly fishing, and I fished with a lot of warriors and chiefs. Offering tours to fly fishers from around the world would be a sustainable way to bring in money. Local outsiders were always pushing, always trying to bribe and take from the Kayapo. All around tribal land, the rainforest was gone. In its place were towns and cattle ranches. On my last week with the Kayapo, the village of Kokoraimoro hosted the largest festival of the year, called Korokango, which celebrates fertility and the manioc crop. The day before the main ceremony, we all got decorated. As a warrior woman was painting my body, I looked over at her, and something hit me. Jealousy. I was in awe of her capacity for expression, and at the same time, I wished I had it too. The next day, we danced and sang and stomped until late into the night. I was still learning Kayapo and didn't know all the words, but at certain times in each song, we all went, "Whoa!" It felt right. It felt like what I'd been trying to say to rivers, to the Amazon, to the world. After my time on the Rio Xingu, I went on to other rivers and other projects. I saw dams go up and tribal groups mistreated. I traveled for days over deforested jungle. By the end of my stay, I knew one thing. Where indigenous people live in peace, nature thrives. I got back to Colorado in late December. I was out of cash, but completely determined. I would do just about anything to protect the Amazon. I was willing to winter in Colorado or guide back down in Chile again to fund my next moves. The day after I got back, a friend called. He sold fly fishing trips around the world. The owner of an outfitter called the Himalayan Outback had recently reached out to him. He was looking for an experienced guide to train his team of local guides. He asked if I was interested. I'd actually read about them the night before in my favorite fly fishing magazine. The Himalayan Outback targets a fish called the golden mahseer. They look like a cross between a common carp and a Ferrari. They can exceed 75 pounds and are super powerful, evolved to make their spawning run during the monsoon. They can feel logs and boulders tumbling downstream from over half a mile away. And, like the article said, what they can't dodge, they deflect. It sounded amazing, and I'd never been to India. I thanked my friend and said that I just had too much to do in the Amazon. A few days later, the owner of the Himalayan Outback called me and told me more. I'd be running guide courses and guiding trips as well, and when I wasn't guiding, I could fish and explore. The main base was in northern India, across the river from Jim Corbett National Park and Tiger Reserve. The guides I'd be working with had grown up in the footsteps of wild tigers. He also said that I could eat all the delicious Indian food I desired, and they'd fly me in whenever I wished. I told him the same thing. I just had too much to do in the Amazon, but thank you. Shortly after that call, I went to an aquarium to see an exhibit on the Amazon. It was not there anymore. Instead, right inside the door, I came face to face with a golden mahseer. The exhibit was on the rivers of northern India. I panicked. What was I thinking? I messaged the outfitter. If y'all still need somebody, I'm in. A month later, I found myself on a plane to New Delhi. As I sat in the dark in the middle of the night, I told myself over and over that I should be back in the Amazon. I saw dams going up and indigenous people pushed aside and fish floating belly up. I clenched my fists. More than anything, I wanted to speak on behalf of the Amazon, but who would listen to me? At the center of this spinning was the realization I had no voice. And then, something broke. I saw nothing, I thought nothing. When we came into Indian airspace, I looked down at the lights and at the fires burning in the night. I thought about all the temples and all the people below, people who pray to many, many gods, and also to rivers, mountains, trees, and animals. I thought, if they did, why couldn't I? In my head, I addressed everything holy below, and I asked for a new way to express my love for rivers and for the earth. Then, out of the blue, I also asked for a tiger experience. Before we landed, I added, I just don't want to get eaten. 2 days later, the tigers arrived. I thought that the driver might be kidnapping me. His only connection to the outfitter was the crumpled sign that he'd been holding outside the airport. Getting robbed of everything and being left in the middle of Delhi at 3 a.m. somehow seemed fun to me in those moments. We hit the road and he drove like he was drunk. Then we found an early morning chai vendor. He downed the sweet contents of that little clay mug and then he drank another and came to life. Anytime he started swerving again, I commanded him to drink more chai or pull over and take a nap. The sun came up and people came out. Sitting on the left side as a passenger was novel to me. I pounded the floor looking for the brake pedal. I swerved my body, trying to dodge horse carts, women carrying towers of grass on their heads, cattle, monkeys, religious processions. We almost ran over a kid in a school uniform, and I screamed at the driver and told him to pull over. He got out and poured water all over his head and slapped himself in the face. I looked across the road, and my heart jumped. One of the most beautiful women I've ever seen in my life was crouched in the grass beside the road. She patted cow patties into combustible pancakes to cook over. We left the plains in the mid-morning sunlight and went up into the mountains. They were lush and rolling and reminded me of where I grew up in Tennessee. We crossed different ridges and then dropped down into the river valley. We stopped partway down a rough gravel road. Young men in khakis appeared, and they held their hands together at the center of their chests. They said namaste or namaskar. This was no act. It's what you do when you're there. The manager took me to a nylon tent on the edge of camp. I looked down at the river, which could easily be crossed on foot right below. On the far side were mountains covered in jungle and Jim Corbett National Park and Tiger Reserve. There were no fences. And I'm sleeping in a nylon tent? I'd heard how challenging the golden moss deer was, but I'd assumed that a lot of it was just hype. My first job at camp was hosting a fishing celebrity and his film crew. That first evening, the group split. The crew went downstream with the guides, and I went upstream with a couple of the show's biologists. When we got to that long, slick pool, dozens of moss deer were eating bugs off the surface. I matched the bugs with my fly, and I made it move like the natural ones. Half an hour later, and not a single fish was eating anymore. I'd scared them all. It was true. The moss deer felt way more of the world than any fish I was used to. That evening, no one caught a fish. The next morning at breakfast, a farmer came from the village nearby. He said that the previous evening he'd watched 3 tigers outside his house. The tigress crouched in the bushes while her 2 juvenile cubs killed 2 horses and a cow. She was teaching them to hunt. We went out to fish again that afternoon, but this time we joined the film crew. They walked the road down to the spot, but the biologist and I took the riverbank. Along a sandy stretch, I saw my first tiger paw print, also known as a pug mark. I put my hand beside it, and it made my hand look tiny. My fingers looked like little toothpicks next to those massive pads. They filmed until dark. Afterwards, they took the road back to camp. I went with the biologists back along the river. They wanted to see a tiger, even if it was just its eyes glowing in their lights. Some of the elephant grass clumps towered over us. If I'd seen a tiger come out from behind a patch of grass, I didn't know what I'd do. When the film crew left, I moved into the Hati hut, a mud hut on the far edge of camp. Hati, spelled H-A-T-H-I, means elephant in Hindi. My first evening there, I sat on the porch and watched the sunset drift across the valley. What was that? I first thought that the sound was an elephant. Whatever was out there, it was huge and definitely not man-made. That's not an elephant. That's a tiger, a big male laying claim to his territory and everything in it. I pictured him standing on a big rock overlooking the valley. From around the corner came Rajuji, the head housekeeper. He carried a bucket of steaming water for my bucket shower. He dropped the bucket off inside and then came back out. He lifted his chin to point across the river and up the mountain. That's the mother tiger, he said. She says, "Come." Throughout the week, I gave guide classes during the day. At night, I listened to the forest. When a tiger was on the move, the forest moved. The warning calls of prey animals rang out. Sambar deer are at the top of a tiger's menu, and there were other deer too, and a variety of birds and monkeys. They parted like waves where the big cats went. Before sunset one afternoon, the tigress began calling from inside the park, up near the top of the mountain. Hearing her was the highlight of my day, every day. Her calls, even when she was far away, rattled my ribs. Even my collarbone shook. She went quiet for a while. The valley began to glow. The air got cooler. The camp had 2 large mountain dogs, and they wore steel collars covered in spikes. As the tigress came lower down the mountain, the dogs ran up and down the property. I took my bath, and then I went to dinner. We ate around the mud tandoori oven. Partway through, I noticed that the dogs had stopped barking. The guide said that the tigers were probably close. I eventually said goodnight to everybody and headed back to the Hati hut. As I was passing the dog's kennel, I stopped and crouched down and shined my light inside. The 2 were huddled together in a ball in the back corner, trembling. Their steel collars rattled together. One of the guides saw me looking at the dogs and said, "The tigers are definitely very close tonight." Spiders lined the trail and twinkled like diamonds in my light. A few minutes later, I reached the porch. I was about to turn and unlatch the double doors and enter, but instead, and I don't know why, I stopped and shined my light into the brush below. Two wide-set, glowing green eyes stared into mine. I spun for the double doors and went inside. The next afternoon, she called while we were still finishing up class. Afterwards, I sat out on the Hottie Hut porch and soaked it all in. I went to dinner at dusk. During dinner, the dogs stopped barking again. Afterwards, I said goodnight to everybody. Rajuji offered to escort me back to the Hottie Hut. I put my hands together before my chest and said thank you, but I'm okay. I then bowed, and so did he. On my way out of the courtyard, I looked into the dog's kennel, and again, both were huddled together in a ball in the back corner. I walked back to the Hottie Hut guided by headlamp. Spiders twinkled along my path. When I turned the corner onto the Hottie Hut porch, I went straight for the doors. As I grabbed the latch, the brush below I thought it was elephants fighting. I jumped inside and hooked the latch. For the next hour, I got to listen to this tiger, or these tigers, demolish a large mammal. I started suspecting that one of the tigers had come up on the porch. The latch above the doors was little more than a bent nail through a ring. If a tiger wanted inside, it would not have taken much. I considered locking myself in the bathroom. One side of me wanted it to end. I longed for the sterilized safety of shopping malls and chain restaurants. The other side of me drank it in and craved more. I got convinced that a tiger was on the porch, just outside my door. I shined my light through the little window, trying to see something, but I got mostly glare and darkness. I got up, put on my headlamp, and unlatched the doors. Then I stuck my head outside. I turned to the left. Nothing to the left, just grass and trees. Same to the right. I shined my light straight ahead, into the brush just beyond the porch. Two glowing green eyes locked into mine. I stumbled back and then latched the doors, then collapsed onto the bed. The guys were outside, near where the tigers had been the night before. I got up and went out to join them. A black bull lay dead, flayed open and half-eaten, with a hind leg contorted and up near its horns. I saw 4 deep gouges at the back of its neck where the tiger had latched on with its teeth. Beside the bull was an imprint in the grass and sand that one of the tigers had left while resting after its meal. 2 of me could have fit inside it. I asked Rajuji if he thought it was okay that we were there. He said that the tigers were gone, but they would be back that night to take the bull away. We followed their pug marks down to the river. He pointed out the mothers and then the cubs. The tigresses were elongated like the daughters, but more splayed out. He said that she was old, Not old, but old. Her pug marks headed upstream, where she would likely hang out during the day. That afternoon, while the staff was napping and the guides were out running errands, I packed up some fishing gear and slipped out of camp. I took the road and headed upstream. A mile or so away was a village that looked like a Buddhist monastery. Just beyond the village was a trail that zigzagged down a steep slope covered in rock and rubble. Between the base of the trail and camp was a secluded canyon. I had fished it a few days earlier with the guides. I was pretty sure that the tigress was there. Sometimes I don't know why I do the things I do. I get ideas and I have to act them out. I told myself that I was there to fish, but I knew why I was really there. I also knew that what I was doing was very, very foolish. I felt sick and was trembling as I entered the canyon. The rules to my game? I had to fish just like I would any other day, regardless how freaked out I got. A quarter mile in, and sunlight no longer reached inside the canyon. Some of the walls were high and vertical, and water seeped down into dense vegetation. Whenever I cast, I scanned the forest edges for orange and black stripes. The fish weren't feeding, or at least they didn't like my fly. I crossed a deep spot where a large python sometimes hung out. Half a mile in, and I could barely cast. My body shook uncontrollably, but I kept going. I stopped trying to catch a fish, and instead just cast to random spots as I continued downstream. I climbed on top of a tall mound of river rocks to get to the next spot. A few started to shift beneath my feet, then a few more. I sat there a moment. Then I felt that same slow and heavy sensation that I'd felt the night before with the tigers outside. I could not see her, and I had no idea where she was. All I knew was she felt close. A chill crawled up my spine, and when it got to my head, my hair stood on end. A message cut through the chaos inside me. It did not form into words, and yet it wanted to know what I wanted. I wanted to get out of there. I wanted to return to safety and comfort. My response rose from my belly. Just like the question, there were no words. The closest I could come to describe it would be, I want to know you. But like I say, these were not words. I recoiled at my intention, or whatever you call it. It had sprung up like something foreign, and at the same time, more honest than anything I could have imagined. I got up, secured my rod and fly, and got out of there as fast as I could without showing panic. As the canyon started to open back up, I saw some monkeys and small deer hanging out together calmly, which told me that no tiger was near. If the tiger was around, they would have been letting everybody know. Following my afternoon in the canyon, every time she called, I wanted to run away. Rajuji said that if you don't bother tigers, they don't bother you. That made sense to me. That's also what terrified me. Who did I think I was to try to make contact with them? They would not kill me for food. They'd kill me for my arrogance, for playing with nature like it's a toy. Most mornings we found fresh pug marks on the trail that went around camp. At night sometimes, I was convinced that a tiger was on the porch. I felt that same deep heaviness. Every time I felt it, I told myself that I was just being paranoid. One morning, I went out on the porch to sit in a chair to tie my shoes. As I leaned over, I looked between my feet. I saw, and then couldn't help but pick up, the longest, thickest animal whisker I've ever seen in my life. Fishing clients started arriving, and we stopped having class. We were all guiding. On our last night there, before we went on to another river, we had a feast. The chefs made a bunch of my favorite dishes, which included palak paneer and butter chicken. I got dressed, and then I met the clients for appetizers and drinks around the fire. She was already lower than I thought she'd be. The air got chilly, and we moved closer to the fire. Night fell. I asked the group if they'd heard the call. A few shook their heads, and everyone resumed their conversations. We moved to the dining pavilion for dinner. It overlooked the valley. Throughout the years, I'd trained myself in the Amazon to eat weird things without gagging. I wasn't prepared for the proximity of tigers. I pushed my food around the plate. I told the clients around me that the tiger was nearby, just on the other side of the river. They looked at me and then kept talking. The sambar deer shot over the edge of the hill and headed directly at us. One of the clients screamed. It veered off just before crashing into us, and then it ran across camp. Everyone settled back in. I focused on the far bank. I heard every footstep as she crossed. The sound of her legs in the current stopped. She stood somewhere below, just at the bottom of the hill. I did not touch dessert. After dinner, I walked over to the kitchen and found Rajuji. I asked him to escort me back to the Hadi hut. Across the Himalayan foothills, on the Saryu River, spelled Saryu, there are no tigers. They've been hunted out and pushed out. This was still vivid India, but the valley felt just a little less alive. At the same time, I felt like I could breathe again. The fear was gone. We paddled rafts down to camp, which was a fancy safari-style setup. It sat along the edge of the forest and beside the sandy riverbank. Upstream were lush terraced fields and occasional rapids. The days were calm, and sleep came easy at night. One night I had a dream that I was back in Iowa, where I lived when I was a child. I found myself walking down a straight stretch of blacktop road. Vast fields of corn lined the road, and the corn towered high above me. Every 6 feet or so, I saw a tiger between the stalks of corn, on both sides of the road. The big cats did not come out after me, but I knew they could. I sprinted down the road, but the road kept going and going, and the tigers kept appearing. I started walking again. After many miles, I reached the small farm town where we had lived. I went through the town square and ended up at the community center. There, I found a neon piece of paper taped to the door. The writing on it said, "Today's tiger therapy session has moved to the next town over." Somehow I knew where that was. I left town and took a different road. It went up into the hills and wound through a forest of dead, scraggly trees. Night fell. Glowing green tiger eyes appeared everywhere I looked. I sprinted for a while, but then realized, what's the point? The road kept going and I kept climbing. Everywhere I looked, I saw tigers. I walked for hours. I awoke before dawn. A gear boat is a raft that takes gear, food, and whatever else is needed for a multi-day trip down the river. 2 of us rode gear boats, and one of the guides took the clients. Staff had already left to set up our next camp. A mile below camp, the gentle Saryu meets the big and burly Mahakali. Its glacial green currents boil and swirl. You're never in complete control on a river like this. Instead, you learn to dance. Steep mountains rose on both sides. We entered a tight canyon, and someone had painted white stripes high above on the rock walls. The guide said that this was in preparation for a dam, which would flood much of the farmland back upstream. When I heard that, I went straight back to the Amazon, and I saw the protests, the painted bodies and the bright outfits and the indigenous songs. I wanted to fight, but as I drifted so peacefully down the Mahakali, colors and beauty lingered more than my anger. We left the canyon, and a broad valley opened up. I saw the drone footage of one protest, where people had arranged themselves into one giant mosaic. Their bodies formed an indigenous face and river waves and the words Agua e Vida. While these images flashed through my imagination, I looked at the long gravel bars on the riverbanks. Mahakali river rocks were like none I'd ever seen. They were every color of the rainbow and marbled, like candy made of earth. Now in my head, I saw a giant mosaic made of Mahakali river rocks. One image morphed into the next, of farmers and fish and mountains and flowers. We fished a couple days and then loaded up the boats and continued downstream. River rock mosaics filled my imagination. Later that morning, a large dark snake swam up to my boat. I splashed at it with an oar to send it away. It went over to the other boats. The guide splashed at it too. Then it lifted up and flared a large hood, a cobra. It returned toward my boat, but stayed 20 to 30 feet away. It kept up with me through small rapids and also when I pushed through flat spots with little current. I could not understand why it refused to swim to the bank and just get out. After a mile or so, it started getting tired, and it sat lower in the water. Boils and little whirlpools spun it around and sometimes pulled it under. It kept up, though. After 2 miles, even in flat water, it began to sink. Just its nose stuck out most of the time. All it had to do was swim to the bank, either bank. We approached a bigger rapid with pounding waves and wild currents. It was going to kill the snake. The river narrowed and picked up speed. I prepared to hit the first wave. I said to the cobra, "Save yourself, get out of the river." It shot up to the surface and swam to the rock wall, right as we were entering the rapid. It climbed a foot up the wall and then got washed back in. It tried again. I kept my boat straight but craned my body around to watch. The last I saw, it was 6 feet up a rock. I took a couple more trips down the Mahakali, then returned to the Ramganga and Corbett Park. My first question to the staff that had remained was, "What have the tigers been doing?" They said that since the day we guides had taken off for the Saryu, the tigers had not been around. They said that the tigress did not even call once. I tried to be grateful that I'd had my tiger experience, but I was a little disappointed. I sat out on the Hottie Hut porch that evening and awaited sunset. My first thought surprised me. "Hello, beautiful." Instead of wanting to run away, I held my breath for her next call. And when it hit, I allowed her voice to shake me. What had been intense fear was now something else. Tears streamed down my cheeks. Around the corner came Rajuji with a bucket of hot water. I scrambled to get a hold of myself, to dry my face, to pretend. I don't even know what I was trying to pretend. He looked out at the forest and said, "Funny. You go away and the tiger goes away. Then you come back and the tiger comes back. Funny." Clients did not come for a couple weeks, and so every morning and afternoon, I gave English classes to the staff. Before class in the mornings, I hung out on the Hottie Hut porch. I loved watching the kingfishers scream by. Also, I got to see the local women come down and cross the river to gather food for their cattle and firewood. They laughed and sang as they entered the forest and alerted the tigers to their presence. I stared at their colorful outfits, especially the purple and turquoise ones and the magenta and green. After class every afternoon, I walked downstream to a cliff above a big pool, and I watched the golden moss deer swim around. Then, a little before sunset, I situated myself on the hottie hut porch again. While I sat there, I could not ignore a new sensation in my arm. When I cast a fly rod, the rod bends as the line draws tight, then it springs forward and shoots the line. It is smooth, effortless, and electric. I crave to feel that again, but in a new way. I wanted to run a paintbrush across a canvas the same way that I cast a fly rod. I had no idea what that meant. The two youngest guides, Roshan and Sunil, took me fishing one day. We hiked a few miles through the mountains and then cut down through a clearing in the forest. We got to the river along a remote stretch. From there, we fished our way back down towards camp. I went on ahead of the guys. When I got to a flat, shallow section about 100 yards long, I walked past it. I was about to reach a big bend in the river when a feeling of dread hit me. I stopped and listened and looked around. Everything seemed chill to me. I reasoned with myself. We were in tiger country, and the jungle was close to the bend where I was headed. There was likely no tiger there, but to be safe, I went back upstream and sat on a rock to wait for my buddies. When they came, we proceeded to the bend. Sunil went on ahead of us. Near the middle of the bend, he froze. Then he turned and motioned us over. Patches of sambar fur tumbled across the beach in the breeze. Blood dripped down some of the river rocks. Blurred pug marks showed a running gait. Then we saw where it had killed the deer and dragged it into the woods. "I think the tiger is really close," said Roshan. "Like, just inside those trees?" I asked. He nodded. We had lunch downstream. I could not shake what I felt, that the tiger was still near. I was on edge throughout lunch and during nap time as well. I felt it close as we continued fishing downstream. I told myself that I was just being paranoid. We walked together across a sandy floodplain. There, we found fresh pug marks in the direction we were headed. At dusk, we reached the lonely canyon that I had once fished alone. While the guys lingered at a pool upstream, I went on ahead and covered some of the spots. That weight hit me again, and my pulse quickened. Of course I'd be scared. It was getting dark in tiger country. No, something else was happening. When the guys rejoined me, we put on our headlamps and continued downstream towards camp. Then we spotted a large dark mound next to the river, a mound that was not there earlier in the day. Roshan went first and checked it out. Then he told us to come over. A black bull lay dead, with 4 deep gouges in its neck. Blood slid down its side. On my last day in India, locals were burning the land around camp to make space for a resort. I stayed inside most of the day to pack and to avoid the smoke. Clouds rolled in that afternoon, and it started raining. On my way to dinner, I heard her call from the top of the mountain. She did not come down this night. Her voice grew fainter each time she called. As I was eating, she called again, so faint that I felt it more than heard it. I set my plate down and ran out to the overlook. I stood there getting soaked in the rain, straining my ear to hear her voice one last time. I got back to the States in May and started guiding. I had no idea what I was doing there other than it was just what I did. I tried conservation projects. I contacted artists to collaborate with. I picked up the djembe drum and dreamed of going to Africa. I thought about getting into tiger conservation. I had a ton of interests, and yet each one felt empty. One night, I read an article about an artist who taught himself to paint fish by reading books at the library. Now he's really good. The next night, I read an article about a well-known fly fisherman. He is also now an artist. A while back, he wrote a book about trout, and before he published, he found out that he was going to have to pay somebody to illustrate it. And so he taught himself. My first thought was, good for him, he was born with a natural ability. I was not. When I held a pen, my hand shook. Shortly after I'd gotten back from India, I had another tiger dream. A large, beautiful male walked up to me outside the building where a friend of mine had taken art classes when we were young. He wasn't aggressive, but his request terrified me. It was like I was back in India. He did not speak, but that heavy sensation hit me in the gut. I knew what he wanted. I screamed at him and said, "I cannot do that." I threw rocks and sticks at him and ran away. A few nights later, he approached me again in my dreams. I was outside my high school art classroom. Something about him looked different this time. Once again, I shouted and threw things and ran away. Over the following weeks, he came to me often. He appeared at or near places I associated with art. Each time, I threw something at him and ran off. Each time, he returned thinner. After a month or so, he was skinny and sickly. His fur was matted and falling out. I could see his ribs. He came to me outside an art museum where an ex-girlfriend had taken me to see an exhibit on Degas. I told him to leave me alone. One night, I had a dream that he came to me while I was leaving the house in Colorado on my way to work. He appeared just outside the garage, so skinny that even his teeth had become like needles. I saw care in his eyes. I grabbed an aluminum baseball bat from the garage and chased him down the driveway. When we got to the street, he stopped and cowered at my feet. I raised my bat to end his life. I swung down toward his head as hard as I could, but before the bat made contact, I awoke. I got up and turned on the light. Then I pulled out a piece of paper and a pen. I began to draw. I thought that once I learned to control my hand, I was going to draw some amazing fish. I had landed thousands of them. No, not even close. My hand and my eyes had no idea what they were doing together in this arena. After a month of practice, I gave it another shot. It looks like a fish. I refused myself color that summer. By late August, though, I broke. I started with colored ink and then moved on to watercolors. I stuck around Colorado a few weeks after the season. I walked the river and drew the landscape. I was fascinated with Japanese ink painting. The long, fluid movements of sumi-e reminded me of casting a fly rod. Then I went to the Amazon for a couple months. I did not draw much there. In January, I went back to India for another season. The tigers did not come around, only once. The night before my birthday, a young male came down and left pug marks on the beach. After my birthday, I drew the Hindu fish god Matsya. I got back to Colorado in May and painted Matsya on my paddle. It was a low-water year and my paddle met some rocks. At the end of August, after a long trip, I lost my temper. I threw my dry bag and said, "I'm done." The next day, I collapsed on the ground. I've bounced back from a bunch of illnesses, but this one got me. Months went by and I felt like someone was kicking me in the gut. all day, every day, especially after I ate. Since I could still move in the mornings, I often went to the river walk. One day, I spotted a piece of driftwood that looked like a fish. I went back to the house and had lunch. Then the pain kicked in. I had started taking plants to help with the pain, and as my guts relaxed, I could not stop thinking about that piece of driftwood. In my head, I saw different ways to paint it. I pulled out the acrylic set that my parents had given me for Christmas. The next morning, I went to the river and picked up driftwood. I saved this 5-footer for when I knew what I was doing. A few weeks later, I set it on the rug where I'd been working. I gave it a base coat and then brought out the eye. I got after it. Well after midnight, as I was making it shine, a part of me went somewhere else. I was back in India at the Hadi hut with tigers outside. Except I wasn't the guy trembling on the edge of his bed, but the tiger outside, eating. I devoured this fish. When I finished, I lay down beside it. I felt no pain. Over the following year, I got sicker. The worse I got, the harder I painted. Some days, it felt like I was painting for my life. The joy that I'd once experienced, and my love for fish and rivers, I painted onto each canvas. This is what fed me. I was in the middle of a series called the Kayapo Slam, painting a fish called a paku, when a new pain hit. It felt like someone was pounding a dull nail into my abdomen. I tried to push through, but by late afternoon, my body shook and I could no longer control my hand. That night, I went to the emergency room. Yet again, doctors had no idea what was wrong with me. They sent me home. The next day, I was in agony, but the shaking had diminished. I got out of bed and walked over to the easel. I was furious about my predicament and the predicament around the globe. I needed to attack something. I sketched out the Pyara. The pain had stripped me down to my core. All the fancy ideas and the people I wanted to impress, none of that mattered. I painted me. My jungle fish got little interest. Most people wanted trout. I craved the Amazon. I started covering trout with Kayapo, Shipibo, and Quechua designs. Each one is a river. Back in 2007, I watched the sunset from the roof of a triple-decker riverboat chugging up the Amazon. I was in awe of such beauty, and I remained in awe over the years. I never had a way to express it, until I painted it. The Marañón and the Ucayali rivers come together to form the Amazon. The night that I completed it, I dreamed that I was sitting on a large bed. Up there with me were 3 tigers. They made tiger sounds and they rubbed all over me. I sat there frozen and afraid to move. I fished with 2 rods in Brazil and in India, Winnie 6 and Winnie 10. In 2023, I took them to Florida. I was in the Keys working on a couple commissions. My health was improving. In fact, I went out looking for a rodeo one night. I camped near a channel inhabited by 17-foot hammerhead sharks and large tarpon. I left my tent at 2:30 a.m., then I got in my kayak and paddled up the channel into the outgoing tide. I passed beneath the old bridge. Before I got to the new bridge, I could hear them, like someone throwing rocks from above. Tarpon were lined up like trout, slurping shrimp at the surface. I paddled around them and passed beneath the bridge and continued into the Gulf. Then I set the paddle before me and got up on my knees. I picked up Winnie 10 and drifted down to the tarpon. I swung my fly in front of a couple boils. The fish took gently, almost like a trout. I paused a second and then slammed my line hand back and set the hook. A fish the size of a human being flew through the air and crashed back into the water. It pulled me out into the open and toward the old bridge. Then it spun around and pulled me back under the new bridge. It wrapped around something down there. I clamped down on my reel and pulled tight. The fly broke off. I turned around and saw that I was about to hit a giant cement block, a bridge support. I set down Winnie and grabbed the paddle. If I'd hit where I almost did, the current would have thrown me into a gauntlet of other bridge supports, some of them with low, tight gaps between them. I paddled back up the current and put on a new fly. Then I drifted down. The second fish was bigger than the first. It was bigger than me. It cleared the water right in front of me. After a few jumps, it threw the hook. I was relieved. The third fish did the same as the first, except this one wrapped my actual fly line around something. I pointed my rod at it and yanked back, but it refused to break. I swung into the same spot as earlier, except here I smashed into the cement wall. The current dragged me toward the jumble, where I would likely break Winnie 10 and possibly end up in the water. I held onto the cement with my right hand and fought to break the line with my left. Small waves shoved me in further, and I braced with both hands. Winnie 10, still in my hand, scraped across the cement. I thought about dropping her, just so I could use both hands. I had no idea what that low gap would do to me, or if I could even get through it. I jerked back repeatedly. I almost dropped her in the water, multiple times. Then the line broke. I set down the rod and pushed against the wall. I crawled with both hands, inch by inch, around to freedom. I then paddled back under the old bridge and to the island. A few months later, I broke Winnie 6. I sent her back to R.L. Winston to be repaired. They reached out and said that she's now considered antique. They no longer have the materials to fix her. They offered me a new rod, and I accepted. I asked if I could also have Winnie 6 back. The sensation moved up my arm, of running a brush across a canvas the same way that I cast a fly rod. I asked if they had any other rods around that they couldn't fix. Today, I paint with brushes made out of broken fly rods. Thank you for listening. If you'd like to see more art, check out my website. And if you'd like to hear more, subscribe. Best wishes.